I'd been back from Hungary for a mere 3 days before I was joining the F1 circus once again in Belgium, and having spent the last week in glorious 30-degree heat, I really wasn't ready for what was to come. Hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the Comedy Review, the series that praised Max Verstappen will one day have an engine failure. Truer words have never been spoken. Anyway, thanks once again to Head Out. I will be watching yet another race in 2023 live. We'll speak more on them later, but first I had to be up at a stupid hour in the morning to catch a Eurostar to Brussels. Now I know what you're thinking, it's quite a step up from Ryanair last week, isn't it? And you'd be right. Take a guess which one was 2 hours late though. As it turned out, the train ahead of us had picked a fight with a suicidal deer. The damage being so bad we were held back in France for engineers to fix the damage. On the bright side, I now had another reason to hate the French. While we wait, I might as well cover the news surrounding this weekend. The big story lying with the Alpine camp, whose board of directors were treating it like a football club. On the Friday, it was announced that bitching champion Otmar Safnauer as well as sporting director Alan Permain were to be leaving the team come the end of the weekend. With seemingly no replacements lined up in the meantime, the rumour mill was suggesting Super Mario could come back as a possible option. A once great team in the process of imploding, I'm sure he'll fit right in. I'll be honest, besides that, it was a fairly quiet news week. Besides the other story that Max Verstappen would receive a 5-place grid penalty for a new gearbox, which just means he'll be in the lead by turn 4 rather than the first corner this time round. Regardless, I was finally off the Eurostar and boarding a second train to Verviers. I was pretty surprised there were no custom checks on the Belgium end, they just seemed to let us through. That said, Belgium have a bit of a history of that, don't they? Having probably started World War III in the comments with that one, let's just jump to the campsite, where I realised I'd made a bit of a mistake. You see, here is the tent I thought I booked, and here is what I actually had to stay in for the weekend. The on-track action couldn't come soon enough. Despite the disrupted travel and the small tent and the weather, which couldn't be further from what I had in Hungary 1 week prior, all of those negatives were reduced to nothing as I entered the track for the first time. The undulation and character of the Spa-Francorchamps circuit can only be properly appreciated when you're actually live at the venue. I spent Friday exploring the track and taking in all the views I could. And if you want to see more of my motorsport photography, I've started an Insta for that now, link in the description below. Anyway, I also spent Friday queuing up for 5 hours to see Danny Rick. I mean, what else did you really expect from a simp like me? Along with the AlphaTauri pair, we got to see Fernando come out for an interview, who, I won't lie, didn't look like he really wanted to be there. Oh, and the two McLaren drivers, where I can confirm that Lando stands in the flesh are just as mental as they are on Twitter. People were literally throwing stuff at Norris on the stage. DTS has done a whole lot of good for the sport, but what the hell happened to natural selection? Now among all this, there were actually some cars going round the track. I mean, shock horror, I know. F3 and F2 went out first and were pretty well behaved given the dire conditions out there. Best leave it to the F1 drivers then. Logan Sargent was busy copying his teammates' lines, though I think throwing his Williams into the barrier at Les Combes probably isn't the most ideal start to the weekend. That red flagged a pretty unrepresentative session anyway, it eventually being topped by the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. That would at least make the following qualifying session a little more interesting. I should probably mention at this point that we're in yet another sprint weekend here in 2023, and one of the best things about being at the track was not being able to hear Twitter moaning about it. Quali on Friday would kick off with a scare for Lando Norris, the McLaren driver skating off into the gravel and giving him the excuse he needed for qualifying behind Piastri come the end of the session. The rain was making the track difficult to drive, though it had stopped come the end of Q1. With a dry line forming, the circuit was really coming alive. It's a shame the same can't be said for Daniel Ricciardo's career though. The Aussie looked to have done enough to progress, before a track limits excursion at the top of Eau Rouge meant he would start Sunday's race from 19th on the grid. Only positive being that he was at least used to that starting position from his McLaren days. The sun would be out as Q2 got underway, and as Esteban Ocon revealed his hatred for Rolex, we nearly saw a huge shock exit in the form of 2023 world champion Max Verstappen. The Dutchman didn't have the pace on his final run and just narrowly escaped into the top 10 shootout in the end. The undefeated Red Bull, nearly making a mistake, clearly wasn't good enough for the Dutchmen, who repaid their hard work by treating them like trash over the radio. Christian Horner reportedly went to ask Perez for his marriage counsellor's number, though shockingly he was in Q3 for once, and thus a little bit busy. bit like he was on that boat in Monaco last year. We were at least back to status quo in Q3 however, Verstappen quickest by nearly a whole second, though his 5th-place grid drop promoted Leclerc to pole for race day on Sunday. Before we can get to that, we've got everyone's favourite sprint Saturday to contend with, which managed to somehow be even wetter than the day before. I at least had a poncho that helped somewhat with the weather, though it did leave me looking like I'd had a bit of an accident. And on the subject of wetting oneself, I can imagine that's what the engineers at Haas were doing as they were waiting to report to Gunther Steiner. Both cars out, and Hulkenberg somehow not even setting a lap in SQ1, and thus starting the sprint from the back row of the grid. Now this weekend, for obvious reasons, has seen safety be at the forefront of all discussions, though with that said, the FIA for some reason never confirmed the track as wet, technically forcing everyone to use medium tyres for SQ2. Most teams used their heads and opted to just straight up ignore this. Not Lance Stroll though, who decided to pull a masterstroke and go out on the slicks. Maybe though this was a godly call from the Aston Martin team. Maybe it could cause a huge upset. Oh, never mind, he's in the wall. That crash ended the session early, knocking out not just Stroll, but also his Aston Martin teammate Fernando Alonso. Bet you Lawrence was really pleased with that one. We've just got SQ3 to go then, but I won't waste your time announcing who ended it on top. Though while Max dominating yet again was no surprise, what was happened to be the man who finished in second. McLaren's Oscar Piastri pulling out a stormer of a lap to only just miss out on the sprint race pole. And with more wet weather on the way for the race, that might just be good news for McLaren. I can't say it was good news for me and the other fans with no roof above our heads. I'd only just dried out and now my wet patch looked even more convincing. The sprint ended up being heavily delayed, with fans at the track getting so drunk in the meantime they were cheering the sun when it finally emerged like it was the work of some Egyptian god. Despite it being dry by the time we got underway, F1 still decided to start the race behind the safety car, and when it peeled in, several drivers, including second place man Oscar Piastri, were quick to box and switch from the full wet to the intermediate tyres. One of the men who didn't was Max Verstappen.
Come on, Oscar!
You know, I think Spa liked that one. Even the Dutch fans seemed to be cheering for Piastri. Then again, they'd probably had so much alcohol by this point, they just saw orange in the lead and thought good. So with just 10 laps remaining, Oscar was leading an F1 race for the first time in his career. Now, could he hold on? Well, of course not, but Alonso pulling a Stroll moment at P1 eliminated any doubt of Verstappen retaking P1. Sure enough, the Red Bull soared past the McLaren on the restart, and the battle for the lead was done and dusted at that point. Further back, however, things were getting a little more interesting. Sergio Perez was busy battling #blessed for 4th, and we got some great side-by-side action here. But according to the FIA, this isn't allowed, and the Briton was handed the penalty. Meanwhile, in Formula E, this is apparently a racing incident. Gotta love the consistency. As Perez turned his Belgian sprint into a beach holiday in the gravel, Verstappen was coming through to win yet again, with Piastri holding on to second and Gasly taking a shock P3 for Alpine. I guess that's one last middle finger from Otmar to Alpine management. But with yet another exciting sprint race in 2023, all eyes turn to the main event on Sunday. Before we get to that though, I need to say a huge thank you to Headout for sending me out here in the first place. If you don't know already, Headout are a ticketing company who can send you to a wide range of Grand Prix on the 2023 calendar. Now, I know a lot of you are here from my coverage of IndyCar, and with Austin not too far away, it's a perfect time to start booking your seats if you haven't already. Speaking of seats, Headout offer the best available, and at the best prices as well. They also do regular giveaways where you can win massive discounts on your experience, or if you're very lucky, you could get them completely for free. There's no better time then to have a look at their site, and if what I've said already isn't incentive enough, you can use the code FP130 at checkout to get a further 30% discount anyway. So head out to the link in the description below. Now back to the action. Sunday would bring something I really didn't expect from Spa. Sunlight, and in a much brighter mood, I got ready for an incredibly exciting half lap before Max Verstappen got into the lead. Oscar Piastri was eager getting off the line as well, so much so that he stuck it up Carlos Sainz's inside, the Ferrari driver squeezing him into the wall and taking both of them out of the Grand Prix. Leclerc up front had held the lead for all of 20 seconds before Sergio Perez slipstreamed him up the Kemmel Straight. The Mexican was into P1 by the time the cars reached Les Combes, as further back his teammate Max Verstappen pulled an identical identical move on the other Ferrari. Next car up the road for Max was none other than Lewis Hamilton, and as we prepared for that almighty accident, Lance Stroll was making an overtake, which I honestly think is the first time I've said that all year. That move was on Lando Norris, who was now dropping back himself. And as all the 5-year-old papaya fans burst into tears, here's the Dutch Messiah not riding over the top of #blessed for once. A move on Leclerc was just a couple of laps away, but now Verstappen would face his toughest battle of the race, a battle with a man and equal machinery. Guess it's too bad that man is also Checo Perez. The race, like the sprint the day before, looked like it was done and dusted, though the arrival of more rain looked like it might throw a spanner in the works. That was proven right when Max almost lost it going through Eau Rouge, all the while treating his engineer like he'd caught him DMing Kelly Piquet. The rain soon passed though, and the midfield were busy keeping us entertained. Lando Norris's race had deteriorated so much that he was now battling with Logan Sargent, though he pulled a fantastic move around the outside of the Bruxelles hairpin to get ahead of the American. Pierre Gasly was busy making a move on the other Williams, and in equally impressive fashion, whilst teammate Esteban Ocon swooped round the outside of Yuki Tsunoda going into Les Combes for P9. Daniel Ricciardo, meanwhile, was stuck back in 16th, though for the sake of my mental health we'll just move past that one. As for Max Verstappen, well, he was busy pulling a pit stops gap ahead of his teammate, and after 44 laps, crossed the line to take his 8th successive victory. One of these days he will have an engine failure. Someday. No, in all seriousness, fair play once again to Max and Red Bull. They've been the class of the field in 2023, and now we're in a position where Max can equal Vettel's record of 9 straight victories at his home Grand Prix in Zandvoort. Now, it's hard to judge exactly how exciting the race was for all of you guys at home, but from where I was, it was incredibly entertaining. There was a lot more side-by-side action where I was sat than I initially expected, and as I said in Hungary last week, the atmosphere of the track is just something completely different to when you're watching the race at home. If you've not been to a Grand Prix yet, you've just got to do it at some point. A massive thank you then to Head Out for sending me out there once again. And to all of you guys, without your support over these last few years, I'd never have these opportunities, so a massive thank you. I also can't forget about my patrons and channel members for their continued support as well. If you'd like to get involved with that and receive early access to some of my videos, check out the links in the description down below. For now though, that's all from me, so I'll see you very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.